4 years ago, pandemic sweeps the world. One of the things that I remember from our interview that was really stunning to me was that it seemed like there were no hospitals or doctors, or I don't want to say doctors, but let's just say the zeitgeist of the medical world in general was not interested in any solutions for treatment of the sickness. It was more like, once you go to the hospital, that's when we'll put you on a ventilator or whatever, and remdesivir, all that sort of stuff. And so you were looking at, how do we actually treat this thing with things like hydroxychloroquine, which the media demonized as not being helpful, but also having all these side effects. And you would say that was not true.
Well, it was actually even worse than this.
Okay.
Where there were data from the first SARS pandemic saying, listen, hydroxychloroquine is going to have an antiviral effect. In fact, Anthony Fauci said that. Former President Trump said this could be a game changer. The most published microbiologist in the world, Didier Riault from France, said, listen, I'm testing this in the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It looks like it works. And Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit did a 1,000+ patient study, and hydroxychloroquine reduced mortality in patients, particularly when treated early in Detroit. Reduced mortality. And at that moment, after it had essentially assured us that we were good with hydroxychloroquine, at that moment it was crushed. The FDA said, do not use hydroxychloroquine. The Australian TGA said, do not use hydroxychloroquine. We had a U.S. stockpile of hydroxychloroquine. Peter Navarro in the White House wanted to release it. Peter reached out to me. Rick Bright, who was on the other side of this, did everything he could to block hydroxychloroquine. Rick Bright later on joins the Rockefeller Foundation, a vaccine promoter. Clive Palmer in Australia procures enough hydroxychloroquine to actually treat the entire country of Australia. The federal authorities in Australia seize it and they destroy hydroxychloroquine. They destroy it. We could have used it for malaria, rheumatoid arthritis, or another. So it's even worse than what people think. It wasn't just an idea. We were making giant steps forward with hydroxychloroquine. It was safe, and it was modestly effective, and it was crushed.
Why do you think they crushed it?
They crushed it for the same, that was in 2020, for the same reasons why in 2021 they crushed an even more successful drug, ivermectin. And in Pierre Corey's book, The War on Ivermectin, probably the best titled book, it lays it out here. Hydroxychloroquine crushed in the first year, ivermectin crushed in the second year of the pandemic. Why?
And these are very common drugs, right?
Common, generic, widely available, used for multiple purposes. And they were crushed for the following reason, is that I think it was intentional in order to promote fear, suffering, hospitalization, death, to promote these things in order to prepare the population to accept only one option, and that was mass vaccination.
Wow. Dark. Really dark.
What other conclusion can we draw? Because in my book, Courage to Face COVID-19, we have learned so much. We now understand that all the nasal sprays and gargles were crushed. There were nasal sprays and gargles, iodine and xylitol-based gargles, that were clearly reducing the intensity and duration of symptoms. They were actually preventing COVID-19. Randomized trial by Baumforth and colleagues with xylitol. It was better than a vaccine. We're talking nasal sprays and gargles. The Federal Trade Commission came out with a COVID misinformation policy and immediately sued every company that had a promising over-the-counter approach for COVID-19. Nasal sprays, nutraceuticals and supplements, prominently vitamin D. Eric Naputi hit with a giant federal case against him for vitamin D. We saw monoclonal antibodies. Now, these were high-tech, emergency use authorized, very expensive, government authorized products that were safe and effective. And I used them to the best extent I could in McCullough protocol, one by one taken off the market within a few weeks of being entered on the market because of theoretical concerns they may not work. Everything was suppressed. Other repurposed drugs, colchicine. Colchicine is a drug we used in gout and in pericarditis for years. There's been now a network meta-analysis of 39 other meta-analyses, large trials, including the Corona trial, 30% reduction in mortality with colchicine, which we extended for 30 days during treatment, suppressed. Hospitals never used it.